this. God, we thank you for the opportunity to gather together here today. I pray that you would grant us wisdom as we talk with one another, good thoughts, good questions. And I pray, God, that you would guide us in wisdom that we might love you more truly and rightly. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all for showing up. This is an experiment for my wife and I. We've never tried to do this kind of team teaching. And I think we're going to actually not even team teach so much as, in theory, converse. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. Like it's easy when you teach. Well,
we do have some practice conversing.
We converse all the time, no, of course. But normally you're conversing or you're teaching. But it's like you have to sort of have an agenda. I want to go here, here, and here. But also, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe there'll be a little chemistry. We can hope. We've thought and talked about this stuff for a long, long time. I've been reading about some of the topics we're going to be talking about tonight for at least a couple of years, and so I want to kind of share at least some of the thoughts with you. The things we're going to talk about the next 4 weeks, we're just beginning a conversation, beginning thoughts. I don't have totally worked out thoughts on a ton of these questions, and I don't expect that all of you will, but I hope at least you'll have some good questions, some good thoughts. A lot of it is reflecting on our own lives and the ways that we use technology and how that shapes who we are. I know, I sort of introduced our discussion as a continuation of the AI conversations we had about 6 weeks ago. And we will get to AI, but it's not going to be front and center, and particularly not tonight. And there's two reasons for that, I think, maybe more than two. One is that we really want to focus on the spiritual dimensions of these technologies. So we really want to think about what is attention and what is worship. And so those two concepts will be kind of at the front of what we're doing tonight, and then technology will come in a little bit towards the end. But the other reason is, I think one of the things, if I had to say like one take home that I wish everybody would realize about technology, I mean, I could be wrong, it's my opinion, other people have other opinions, but I feel quite strongly about this particular opinion, is that technology is never a neutral instrument. We often think that like technology is just a tool. You can use it well if you're a good person, and you can use it badly if you're a bad person. And as long as the good people are using it, we're good, right? And I think that what we miss with that picture is that technology always shapes the people and the cultures that use it in ways that no one can predict, right? I mean, I think if you think about the smartphone, or you think about the internet, it's interesting, when people first tried to do internet news, they essentially tried to do like CNN and New York Times, but just online. And it didn't work very well at all, right? It's a different medium. People consume news differently. And so you get sites like the Huffington Post and BuzzFeed that have a very different way of writing and way of talking. Anyway, so the point is like any technology you use will shape you, it will shape us, and we won't know how it's going to do it till it's done it.
Yeah,
and so, sorry, go ahead, please. Yeah.
No, because for me, so in the Neil Postman book, he uses the example of a hammer. He's like, even using a hammer changes your arm. Like it just does. If you only ever hammer with your right arm, you're going to have, and not that this is a terrible thing that your arm changes because you used a hammer, but that there is always this two-way thing. But my favorite example of us not being great at anticipating this is an ad I found a couple weeks ago for the Palm Pilot when it first came out. Unbelievable. Full-page magazine ad advertising the Palm Pilot for young people in the room. It was like the first phone that you could get email on. And the catchline was 7 ounces of freedom. And it was like, it's so light, you stick it in your pocket, and then you are free. And of course, it was a tether, right? Like it turns out, since that, we're never really not in the office. And those can just be hard things to anticipate.
I remember my dad's first vacation with his BlackBerry, which is another one of these, and it was like he was now expected to do email for at least 2 hours every day, even on vacation, because he had the BlackBerry along with him. And so his vacations were never the same until he retired.
Well, ever since COVID, there's no such, like, every once in a while schools they will cancel class for hurricanes sometimes, but often they'll tell you to just move it online. Like once that becomes a possibility, it becomes the expectation. Anyway.
No, thank you. That's breaking any time. I mean, eventually, so she'll be leading other days. I'm going to kind of lead, but I'll be throwing questions her way shortly, but interrupt anytime. So the idea with AI is like it's a new technology, and no one knows what it will do to us, and that could be us as individuals when you use it. That could be us collectively in our politics, in our dating life, whatever it turns out to be, right? The way these things shape us, we don't know. And because of that, what we want to do is we want to look at other technologies where we have a track record and say, what did they do to us? There's a lot of really great books, and if anyone wants more reading, I have plenty of reading I can recommend. But there are a number of good books that were written, some of them 60, 70 years ago, about the printing press. And there you can see, like, how did it change us that suddenly we all became literate and we had the printing press? And it turns out there's all these subtle, complicated ways about the linearity of thought and all these other kind of things that you would never think of. And so when we look at these past technologies, many of which we've lived through, like this thing, right? It allows us to ask the question better, not perfectly, because again, no one can predict what it'll do to us, but better, what might this do to us? Not what are we going to do with this thing, but what is it going to do with us, okay? So that's kind of why we're not going to be just jumping right into AI, even though that's the most interesting and disruptive technology on the horizon. But I do want to step back before we get into technology and talk about the questions of attention and worship. And so here I've got a few questions. I should say, if you have questions as we go along, particularly if it's like something seems unclear, you want to jump in, feel free. We'll also have time for questions at the end or comments. So, yeah.
Quick question.
Please.
And I think I probably know how you're going to answer this, but in that sense, you were saying that you don't feel that technology is neutral, but you're not necessarily going to say, that in a binary way, it's good or bad. Rather, your premise is that it affects us in all these different ways that are multifaceted.
Of course.
So we should put that premise of good or bad aside. Is that kind of what you're saying?
No, I think we should be cautious, but I think anything has advantages and disadvantages. It will shape us for good and bad, and I think take your, so yeah, I don't want to put it aside. The main thing I want to avoid, though, is the naive view that like this is just a tool and it will be whatever our principles make it, rather than it making us. That's the main thing. And no, I'm certainly not all negative at all, but it's just a question of predicting so that we can be wise as individuals and as a society, like what could this do to us? How will it change us in ways that we don't expect? So I want to start by talking about attention. And so the first question I have for you, Dolores, is whether you think that attention is a general skill. So like if you know how to pay attention in this domain, you can do it in this domain. Like you're either good at attention or you're bad at attention. Or is it something that develops within specific domains, like I'm good at paying attention here, but not here? So thoughts on that?
Yeah, this was a really fun question to think about. He sent me these questions like yesterday. And my initial feeling was, no, this really is pretty general, because if you are super distractible, like me, I am super distractible. This is a fact about myself. So when I start to lose discipline in one area, I see the effects of that loss of discipline in another area. It's not like, well, I've gotten bad at reading books, but at least I can still pray uninterrupted for an hour without feeling like, I don't think it works that way. I think discipline is fairly holistic, right? I think that when we get at least for myself, and I think a lot of people, I think discipline is fairly general. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, discipline is general, but to pay attention to something, it has to be fairly tractable to you. There have to be things about it that you're able to, so I could look at a sunset and really find it beautiful. And I know that Linda and Bonnie could look for at that same sunset, probably paying it a kind of attention that I can't, because I don't have the eyes that they have to see color and shape and shadow, right? And so there, I think, even though our ability to focus is in some sense just like any other discipline where it's general, I think there's domain-specific stuff where it's much easier to watch a whole football game if you know the rules, right? It's much easier to listen carefully to music if you have some words to characterize what's going on. So yeah, my answer is kind of a mix of the two, I think.
I think one of the things that makes having the two of us up here maybe interesting, helpful, hopefully, is that we pay attention very differently in a lot of ways. We have very different mental lives, and when it comes to whether we're distractible and how we're distractible and by what we're distractible. But I want to push way further towards the it's domain specific. And I want to start with, we were at a concert last night. It was a bluegrass concert. Down at the Orpheum. Has anyone been to the Orpheum?
This makes it sound so much cooler than we
We're not
usually
that
are.
cool.
It
No,
was-
but
it was really fun though.
It's a really cool club, and it's right over there in Nebraska, 2 miles from our house. So great bluegrass show there. And Dolores came out afterwards, and we were talking about the music, and she said, I don't even know, I wasn't listening to that part. I was mostly just watching their hands and what they could do with the mandolin and the guitar. And I thought about that, like I could not pay attention to what they did with their hands in the way that you could, because to me it's like, yep, he's moving it fast up and down the fret. What else can I see, right? I watched him for about 30 seconds and I'm like, yep, still moving fast. I don't know, what else is there? You know, I don't have anything else to observe.
So that's a perfect example, because one of the things I was noticing with the mandolin was how many of the whole chords moving up and down the neck didn't change chord shape very much, right? So I was like, all right, I got to learn what those standard chords are that he's moving on. But by having those categories, it gave me more things to sort of fixate on, and I was coveting. I was really, really wanting those abilities. Yeah.
Well, and I think beyond that, I mean, the amount of time you spent. So I don't know if I've ever actually forced you to give as accurate of an answer as you can to this question, but if you had to guess an average per week, how many hours did you spend playing the guitar in high school?
Oh gosh, in high school, probably 20 to 30, maybe more, depending. I mean, certainly many hours every day. Definitely went at least a decade where I didn't go a day without playing the guitar. If I went away for the weekend, I had to bring it with me. And now, I mean, worship team is what keeps me playing. It's nowhere, now I don't play it nearly enough at all. But yeah, no, multiple hours every day, for
And
sure.
the longest I've ever managed to pay attention to a guitar is about half an hour. I have tried to learn to play. I have a dobro, and I was trying to play some slides. After like half an hour, I'm like, I got nothing. I don't know what else to do with this dumb thing. So, I mean, I think the stereotype between you and I would be that I'm much better at focusing and blocking out things, but when it comes to the guitar, you're way better at paying attention. When it comes to probably an endless series of other things, it seems to me, right? And so part of what I think you see with this idea is that attention, I mean, what I want to, the kind of religious writers that I've been reading on attention, one of the things they're very good at is saying attention is not just blocking out distraction, right? We often think of attention and it's like, well, you either are paying attention or you're distracted. And attention is just the opposite of distraction. But attention is really so much more than that. It's the ability to see and be drawn into, like again, when I look at them, I don't see any interesting things about the fingers on the guitar. Or to take a different example, imagine a child who cannot yet read a book. How long can that child stare at a no-picture book with no pictures, right? Or if it's in a language they can't read, how long can they stare at it, right? And so what you realize is that attention isn't just blocking out the extra noise or the thoughts you don't want there. It is also seeing patterns that draw you in, right? They're not just little squiggles, they're actually words and you know what they mean. And if it's an interesting book, well, you can pay attention a lot better than if it's a boring book. And so attention is more than just that blocking out. Yeah, Brian?
So do you think if it was your job or your responsibility to pay attention to that fretboard, would you be able to do that? Because I can't help but wonder if it's more a difference of the action on the fretboard is just naturally catches the Lord's attention,
Yeah.
whereas something else is more likely to catch your attention. Being able to pay attention
Yeah.
as a skill
Yeah.
seems like a little bit different.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, eventually I want to get to the distinction between what captures our attention and what cultivates our attention. And so I guess what I'd want to say is, Dolores has cultivated, the guitar cultivated her attention, she cultivated her attention with the guitar. I mean, obviously if someone told me, they're like, I want you to pay attention to how many times his hand moves up and down the fretboard as he plays. I could do that. You pay me money or you tell me it's important to do. I'm gonna be bored, but I'm still not seeing what's most interesting there, right? Like there's things I'm not seeing that she sees. I just see motion up and down. I don't see peculiar chord progressions. I just can't see that, right? I can't see whether, so I do agree that you can learn discipline. I mean, maybe one way to think about it is this, like, if you want to learn to pay attention to something, you need discipline, but to really pay attention, it ultimately has to go beyond discipline. Like if you think of a book, you're reading a book, right? And your mind keeps wandering. There is no effort of will that keeps your mind from wandering. You have to get sucked into the book. Now, you can put yourself in a position to be sucked in the book. You can try to read it every day. You can read it in a place that's quiet, right? So your will can do something, but your will can't keep your thought from being like, oh, right? So I don't know, does that satisfy you, or are you still unpersuaded by my?
Persuaded enough for now.
Well, okay, that's fair. No, I mean.
And I actually kind of think of it as like stepping stones, or maybe incremental, but maybe I think of it more like big steps. Like even just because you play, you use the term the fretboard, right? Like when you see the instrument, you see the fretboard as a distinct part of that instrument, right? I just think to pay attention for any real amount of time, you have to at least have some basic categories of the thing. And the more categories you have of it, the easier it is to pay more attention, because now they sort of sit still. Like even just, oh my gosh, this is such a silly example, but I think it really is one of my best friends from growing up was one of those like super athletes, and I was the other one, so it was really not ideal. Every sport she did, she was great at, and the only exception was one time I had been playing a lot of like two-person football with somebody, and we played 2-on-2, my friend and I and Christy and her husband. And they were super athletes, and we were musicians. But we just kept beating them, and we couldn't figure it out. And we had a handful of plays, but we would run the plays. Finally, it was so unbalanced, we were like, let's just switch teams, right? So I was with Adam, and they were together. And I said, okay, so what play do you want to run? And he said, well, let's just do what you were doing, right? I guess I'll run and get open and you throw it. Literally didn't know that we had mapped out plays. Like that was how base level his knowledge of football was. Like, you think I didn't know where he was going to go, right? Like didn't even, and I think trying to watch football when you don't even know that there are plays involved is so boring too. So you need, I don't know, that's what I think. You need at least some kind of footholds, and then the longer you pay attention, the more of them you can get. Yeah, Jonathan.
Yeah, I had a question.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think I missed somebody. Okay.
Just a really quick question for you guys. You're both teachers, and so the question is something like, how does this relate? When you think of what you're doing, trying to teach students, how much does that relate to paying attention to patterns like that they've never seen before, or having the skill to, is that part of what this is?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot. I think even just here at the co-op, there's a short story on technology that I assign now in every class I teach. Every class at USF, I find a way to work it in, and I did it at the high school co-op as well, because it's super prescient. And it was written before AI, but it taps into everything. And what I said to my philosophy of mind students the other day was like, what I just want you to have good questions to ask yourself, right? Like everything, so the story's about an implant, a neural implant, but it's like, it doesn't have to be in your brain, it could be in your pocket. For the technology, the kinds of ways that the technology is disruptive in this story are ways that technology is disruptive in our, so I do think trying to get them to see that pattern, and even just saying like, hey, if you think you'd be really happy living at home and not working with a basic income, how happy were you in COVID time, right? And just trying to get them to connect to see these kinds of patterns. So I don't know, for me, I think it's big.
Yeah, so I do think, and I think this is a lot of where it starts to phase over into our spiritual life, that a lot of what we need is the right categories to see the right patterns in our own lives. To see, because ultimately, where attention is going to relate to worship, and it's going to relate to seeing God's glory in nature, God's purpose in our lives, God's work in history. And I think learning to see, like, where is the kingdom of God? How is it at work? In what ways is it at work? All those are questions of seeing patterns that, you learn those patterns from scripture and from other kinds of things. So I do think, like, this question of can you see patterns in your own life is a crucial part of what, as a philosopher, you want to get them to do. The other thing I would say about, like, how this relates to how I teach my students is, and I think how we teach our kids, I think the key to attention is love. Like you will pay attention to what you love, and you can put yourself in a place to learn to love something, right? If you want to love music, go hang out with musicians, listen to good music, pick up the guitar. Like I picked it up for half an hour, like then it didn't catch me, and I put it down, right? If I wanted to love the guitar, I would have had to regularly, like my son Sammy, he's been playing the piano for 4 years now, and he's only really started loving it probably the last 6 months, I would say, where he'll just sit down and compose his own things. And for a long time, it's just like, no, you just, you bang out the whatever you're supposed to be doing. So with my students as well, I would say, like, I want to force them by my grade. I have some like a carrot, I guess, right? A little stick, which is I give you your grade, I can fail you, I can pass you. I try to use that, but if I don't get them to love what we're doing, it's not really of much value, I think, in the end. I think that's true with our kids too. Like that's what we want, is for them to develop love, because the degree of, like, Sammy now, his other love is chess. And like I kind of like my kids to be into chess. I like chess, and I would play with him, but he would just pick it up and drop it. And now he's like 5 chess games a day. He's carrying his chessboard around. Like every time we sit down, he talks about it, the different pieces, right? He's just obsessed now. And it's that love that I just put him in the place to learn that, to fall in love with it, sort of showed him the chessboard, this is how you do it, and it caught,
I skipped a question by mistake. I missed you.
2 words came to mind, and they're not the same. I see them somewhat for what each one of you said. One is experience or history, like the guitar.
Yeah.
Okay? And the other is interest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Reading a book. If you're interested in that topic, in that book, then you're going to be much more into it. Or
Yeah.
the opposite. Those two kind of describe
Yeah,
ways
yeah.
of determining attention.
That actually gets to the next
Yeah.
question, if I can go on. Do you want to say
Sure.
one thing? I mean,
Yeah.
because the next
No, that's
question,
great. The next question.
I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about,
It'll all
sort of building on
connect.
these. I'm sorry?
I think the next question connects to
Exactly.
Jonathan's
That's
question. Yeah, and
both
all,
questions.
all of these, yeah.
So what I wanted to ask Dolores, but it relates to what you said. So you mentioned the 2 things: interest or love, as I was choosing to call it, and history, and so, or experience, exactly. And so what I was going to ask is, what role do you think that, I think I had 4 things: love, memory, hope, and community play in attention?
Yeah, awesome. I forgot the memory one, but yeah. I want to start with the love one, because again, I was in a talk a week or 2 ago that was like, what C.S. Lewis and economics can teach us about love. It was really interesting, and it was actually fantastic. But really, she just drew a ton from Lewis's The Four Loves. But one of the themes that she just really sat with was, like, in any relationship, if somebody loves you, or if you love them, what you want really more than anything is for them to really know you, right? Like, it's one thing if somebody loves you or has happy feelings for you and says that they love you, but they don't really know you. But when somebody really loves, like really knows you and loves you, there's nothing like that, right? Because all of us are a little bit messy up close, right? So it's like, no, you really know me and you love me. And we don't know people without paying attention to them, without making that effort to actually invest. Actually, at the concert last night, I was reminded of this little cassette tape. Oh gosh, yes, tape. That I got for Christmas one year from an aunt who sings also, and plays the guitar. And it was like a Shania Twain tape. And we lived on Long Island. Nobody listened to Shania Twain. I didn't know how she'd even heard of this country person. I was not a country person. So I thanked her, but I know she could see. And she's like, no, look, here's the song, you gotta hear it. And she pointed, and there's a song on the tape called Girls with Guitars. Oh, it's such a good song. And it was me. I was this dorky 14-year-old. And it's all about, like, yeah, you're at Battle of the Bands with your friends, and they're all checking out the singer, and you are watching the fingers of the guitar player, right? And the reason that gift meant so much to me was because she knew me so well. Like, she was paying attention, she knew me, she loved me, and I could see that in this. So that's like one aspect. But getting back to both of these, what both the questions got to, not just our students, my children, but also really myself, right? We don't always love the right things, and we don't always even know that we would love certain things if we're not compelled to give them some time, right? So the internet and AI has changed this a lot, obviously, but for a long time, you would get some criticism if you had an attendance requirement for your college class. It was like, well, like students should just want to come, right? If they don't want to come to your class, you're doing something wrong. And I remember thinking, how will they know what I'm doing in my class if they aren't coming, right? Like, I have to get them in the door just to even see if they like it, right? And this is so much of teaching, I think, is like, I'm going to use these incentive structures to force you to pay attention to something that I think you would love. I also think you should love, right? And then I try to do that for myself too. I struggle with this. I definitely have ADD and am flighty. The smartphones have made my ADD symptoms worse. I always had them, but they've made them worse, right? If I sit with my phone for an hour afterwards, I don't feel good. If I just sit with a book, I feel great, right? But I forget that, and I'm kind of going on a tangent here. I just think it's easy to make it sound as if, well, if you love it, you'll just do it. And I just think we're so much more complicated than that, right? Sometimes we love it, and in the moment we forget that we love it, and so we do the thing that we don't even really love, and it doesn't make us happy, which is why we need discipline.
Thoughts on community?
Yeah, I was thinking about this because, again, just like love, right? To be in a real community with people, you have to know them. You have to pay attention. You have to give some of your resources to just observing them. Because if you don't, you won't be able to help them when they need help or to connect with them when you see them. And there are awesome, amazing benefits of that, right? To be in community is to get attention from other people of a kind that makes you feel known and loved. But there are costs too. Like sometimes you've got something to do, and then somebody in the community needs something that you're actually able to provide, and you kind of know that you can provide it. And so you have to actually, if you want to really have a community where you get any of the goods from it, you have to also carry some of the costs of it. And I think some of those costs are attention costs, where you have to be willing to divert from your interests to paying attention to other people.
Yeah, so I was actually thinking of it in a different way. That I think you're right that you have to give attention or spend attention for community. What I was thinking about as well, though, is the way that a community amplifies individual attention. One of the things I've learned about life from the nursery, when I used to get to work in the nursery, they don't let me do that. I mean, they let me, but they told me they need me in 5th grade. So, but the nursery's where it's at if you want to, do church service on a Sunday morning. And I learned by watching the kids, which I'm sure most of you observe this as well, that as soon as one child begins to pay attention to a toy, the attention of every child is drawn to that same toy until they turn away. Right, and then suddenly no one wants to talk. Right? And I think what you see, like one of the ideas that I found very transformative for me, thinking about what it is to be a person, is an idea by a French philosopher named René Girard, who has this concept of mimetic desire. And his claim is like, you think you're an individual and that your desires define you. And he said, actually, desires are always what you copy from those around you. You learn to love and desire by seeing other people loving and desiring. And if you think about the most basic thing, like how is it that human beings learn speech? Because we follow a pointed finger. That's a table. Why do we follow the pointed finger? Because someone else is paying attention and their attention draws our attention. Okay? And I think this is really important for understanding corporate worship. It's really important for understanding like liturgical calendars. And like we could all fast on any given day, or we could all give something up or remember anything. We don't have to all do it on the same day, but when you do, it multiplies your attention, right? The fact that we're all thinking about something together or going through Lent together is so important for making it seem real, right?
And then it feeds back as well. So I love that. You're right. It increases your attention, but then also being among people who are also paying attention to that increases the community. You get another further depth. It's like this feedback loop, right? So you're paying attention to the same things together, and then you're drawn together more because of it.
Yeah, I think probably community. I mean, a lot of people will say like, church is great. We should just do that without God. right? Like the health benefits, right? The community benefits. Like if we could just manage to like do that without the whole gut, that would be great, right? And a lot of people talk that way. And it doesn't usually work very well. And I think the reason it doesn't work well is because like relationships and communities are formed not when we pay attention just to each other, but to something together. You know, and certainly, and so I think the idea of what binds us together is a common love and a common attention to God, not an attention. So it's sharing a love of an object, not sort of sharing love of one another, though we do certainly love one another. But our love for one another, I think, is grounded in a common love for something else. So yeah, memory. Anyone try memory?
Yeah, I think I wrote stuff down about that, but I don't remember it.
I have become a person who needs reading glasses. It happened overnight, and I have been complaining about it ever since. I've been just so mad about it. I think it's ridiculous. Oh yeah, so here's what, you know, I come from a family of storytellers. It's very much an Irish thing, I think. It was really weird when I first started spending time with Michael's family. Their dinner conversations were like discussions. We just tell the same stories. Like, we tell stories from our day, and then when you finish the stories from your day, you tell the stories that everybody's always already heard, because why not tell them again? This is how I grew up. And what I found, it's actually pretty great. I love it. What I found was that I have some memory, like, it really was only a year or two ago that it finally clicked for me. The things that I remember really well are the things that I can catch as a story for myself. I think I'm probably, in a sense, paying attention to, like, oh, how could I tell this to my mom? She's gonna, like, something happens, and I start thinking about how I will tell my family about this, right? And in paying that kind of attention to it, I keep it, right? So I think we build memories of things that we pay attention to, but I also think we keep the memories that we attend to, whereas other things can happen that are really, I mean, I've definitely had times where there's something very significant, and I think, I cannot believe I barely remember this day, right? And I don't pretend to fully understand memory. I think memory's weird. But I think part of it must be the kind of attention that you pay to it back when it's still fresh, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think for sure. I think memory, I hadn't been thinking about it quite this way, but I think memory is an example of attention in the following way. So again, attention's not just blocking stuff out. There is more stuff in the world than you could ever possibly take in and notice. Just like there's more to your past than you could ever possibly remember, right? There's infinite amount of details in any given day if you really wanted to be tedious about it and narrate every single little patch of color that you saw, and you know, you never get done. So the idea is like you are paying attention. Memory is a form of paying attention to the past because it's selecting and it's preserving. And I think beyond that, what you see in that is you do remember almost certainly, not exclusively through story, but it is the pattern by which you hold on to stuff, right? And so I think this idea of attention is like pattern seeing. You need, you know, to go back to like the guitar, like I don't see as much as Dolores because I don't know the patterns. Or to go to someone who's trying to look at a book, pick up a book in a foreign language, particularly like a foreign script, like Arabic maybe, right? You pick up Arabic, at least with Russian, you're like, I know some of those letters. They probably, you know, different, but you pick up Arabic and you just look at it, you're like, that's squiggles, right? And if you ask me to like, you know, I mean, one thing is like if I had to pay attention to a page of written Arabic and you asked me what's on the page, it would take me forever to go through identifying characters one by one, where an Arabic speaker would just read it and they would talk about the idea immediately. They would just see it. It's all there, right? And it's there because they see the patterns, and they see the patterns because of memory. They've seen these things lots and lots of times and they're calling them back. So I think with memory, there's a lot of dimensions. One is like memory is an example of attention. Another is you don't have attention without memory. Memory is always calling to mind things from the past that allow you to, like your memory of the guitar. And, you know, and there's one other dimension with memory. Oh goodness, oh well, it's gone. No, here's what it is. I remember it. I remember it now.
Ironic.
So, yeah, it's gone. Yeah. Ironic, isn't it? Yes. No, this is what it is. So I think with attention, here's a dimension of attention that I don't really know how to think or talk about very well. But it's like when you imagine you're reading a book, okay? You're reading a novel, And it's one of those novels that's really good, so you've read it in like 3 days. Dolores read a novel over the weekend in, what, 2 days, 3 days? She does that, I don't do that. Right, so it's one of those novels where like you have read the last 100 pages like within the last 24 hours. And when you then read the next chapter, all of that it's not in the forefront of your mind, but it's all there and it's informing what you read. And now imagine a novel that you set aside for 3 weeks, and then you pick it up and you read the chapter, same words in front of you, but you don't see it the same way. It's not vivid, it doesn't grab you because all of that background that you're storing up in your head as you read is gone. And I think, a lot of I think a lot of attention, sustained attention, is being able to build up a large pattern in your active memory, your working memory, and then apply it to what's immediately in front of you. So I think that memory is a really important part of it, and part of how I want to then connect this, and I'll ask you how you think this connects to worship, but one way that I would connect it to worship, and just our faith more generally, is the number of injunctions to remember. Right? Scripture is always about remember this, recount this, tell this again. And why is that? Because these patterns and stories have to always be like the background of everything you see and experience. And so this active memory, it's like, why do I need to remember this again? And I think one of the humorous passages that people like to talk about when it comes down to technology and like whether it's good or whether it's bad is a passage in Plato where he laments writing. And he's like, writing is a terrible invention, it's going to ruin things. And people are like, oh, it's so silly. And we gain a lot from writing, no doubt, okay? But his point of what we lose from writing and from literacy is the devotion to memory. Like what the line that Plato uses when the person who invented writing, it's an imaginary conversation, comes, and Plato says, you haven't invented a tool for memory, you've invented a tool for reminding. Right? And now we externalize our memory. And if you read like early Christians who weren't literate, many of them, how many hours worth of scripture they could recite. Right? And the question is like, we tend to think, I think I long thought that like memorizing scripture was like the stupidest, lowest level of like mental engagement, right? I know, it's really vulgar. No, but yeah, I mean, memory in general, right? It's like the most basic thing is you like pour the facts in your head, you memorize them, and then you do fun stuff with them, right? But I just skipped the memory part because I got my Bible right here. Anyway, but if you think that memory is like forming the frame that you see and experience through, right, then that memory work, I'm terrible. I try really hard to remember like Bible verses, and I'm very bad. But I do think it's really important, and I think one of the things that happened with the book is we got lazy about memory because we thought of memory as just like, well, why do that? It's in the book.
Which is exactly what Plato said was going to happen. I mean, I actually love rereading that passage because, also, quick note, you say you're really bad at it, but you're very good at putting the work into memorizing scripture because, it's hard, it doesn't come naturally. But man, Plato said so many things that were so ahead of... One of the things he said was, hey, listen, if you're the one who invented writing, I don't think you're the one who gets to say whether it's going to be good for us. I just want to like make everybody that's telling me about their AI company just read those words and just sit with them for a little bit, right? We need at least somebody other than the person who's deeply invested in its success to tell us whether we should be excited or worried about the new technology. But also, he's like, people are not going to remember because they don't have to. And we don't have these long memorized epic poems anymore. Also, in Plato's defense, the only reason we know what Socrates said is because Plato wrote it down. So he gets a really hard time about this.
It's not inconsistency, it's irony, by the way.
Exactly. I don't think it is inconsistency.
It's intentional
I think
irony.
it's
No, it's
wisdom.
intentional
He's
irony.
like, you know what? This is going to be collectively pretty bad for us, but I guess we'll use it. Being mindful of trying to use it well, but recognizing that these are the things we're going to lose with it. Yeah.
So I'm trying to think if this is the best time to... Is there anything, let's see if there's anything else you want to say about the worship and attention angle, and then turn to like little more to specific technologies. And...
Oh yeah, I've got two things. Look at me, reading glasses are coming out again, guys. It's important. I have two passages about worship that I wanted to read because they're both kind of, I think they're, well, you'll see, they're related, right? So one is there's a Paul Kingsnorth book, Against the Machine, that I have been meaning to read. I read the first chapter, it was really great. And I will get back to it eventually. But even in the first chapter, there's this quote. He's talking about in working as a historian, this is something it took him a while to see. He said, every culture, whether it knows it or not, is built around a sacred order. And this does not, of course, need to be a Christian order. But there is a throne, I love this line, there is a throne at the heart of every culture. And whoever sits on it will be the force that you take your instructions from. And I was thinking about that in terms of worship, partly because it's such a good example of where, like, none of us thinks we're taking instructions from something sitting on a throne, right? Like, I don't think we always know what we're really worshiping, right? And I think that's such a good example of sort of the sneaky aspect of worship. But then I went back to this book, Foster's Celebration of Disciplines, just like an old book about the spiritual disciplines that I really like. And I wanted to see what he said worship was. And he says worship is the human, I mean, he's got a whole chapter on it, right? But here are some lines from it. Worship is the human response to the divine initiative. Singing, praying, praising, all may lead to worship, but worship is more than any of them. Our spirit must be ignited by the divine fire. And I guess I think Kingsnorth is right that we do, without meaning to, conform ourselves to whatever force is kind of driving our culture. But I think Foster's right, that if something's going to be true worship, there's this, it's us turning our attention to the proper, like the proper source of worship. And we can only do that in talking about what captivates and what grabs are. Like, there is this divine, like, invitation, right? That's sort of always there, right? And that if we can just kind of redirect ourselves from whatever is, thank you, occupying our mind all the time, to this invitation that's, and just in diverting our attention in that direction, I guess, I think that we just worship the right thing.
Yeah. I think the only other thing I would say is, it's not in disagreement, just building. No, I don't at all. I don't at all. I think thinking about it, about worship, as you know, I think singing is great, and I wish I could sing better. I don't sing very well. But I don't really know that I'd want to sing nonstop. I don't know that if our worship on Sunday morning was extended through the whole week, I would say, like, this is clearly heaven. No offense to any of the, yeah. No, I mean, you would say it is?
You're sitting right next to James.
James,
man, right?
James, would it be heaven for you, or would even you say, I don't know? No. I mean, why do I say all that? Because, like, clearly you're called to worship at all times. In heaven, it will be nothing but worship. I don't think that means heaven will be nothing but, singing. Though, again, singing is amazing, and I wish I could do
Obviously, I
better.
love Michael Dawson on guitar.
Yeah. So then the question is, like, well, what is worship? Well, worship is responding to the revealed goodness and glory of God. It is the ability to see it in all things. And so I think the question of, again, if you think of, like, why do some people see God's glory in nature or in music, right, or in a child? It's partly the why is a big question. I'm not going to go to the bottom of the why, but part of what's going on is an ability to see those things and the patterns in them properly and in the right kinds of ways. So I think attention is not just something we need for worship in this kind of narrow sense, but it's a part of the worship we're called to at all times and in all places. I think, the one little point, like I haven't gotten to any of the slides. I have a few pictures to show you. They may or may not prove helpful to make my point, and my final point here may or may not be, of great use. But here was my thought as I was thinking through some of these questions, and I was thinking about, like, well, how does this relate to technology? How does this relate to what it is to be a contemporary person in the 21st century? I think we would do very well to think how weird our time and place is, just historically speaking. It's not the condition under which most people have lived, and I'm not being nostalgic about the condition under which most people have lived, but it is worth saying, like, what are the things we don't even notice about our environment, that things that shape us because they're so omnipresent and so normal to us. And the thought that I had is that I think it could be helpful to distinguish between things that capture our attention and things that cultivate our attention. And I talked a little bit with Dolores on this, and she had some good counterexamples, which because my question, here's my thought. My thought was that things that capture our attention rarely cultivate our attention. And things that cultivate our attention often don't capture our attention. So the idea would be like some things hit you, and let me tell you why I was thinking that, and I'll let Dolores get to her examples. You know, we're very good, Pastor Lou particularly used to be very good at this, figuring out how to capture people's attention, right? Billboards are designed to capture your attention. You are driving along in the car, having a conversation, thinking about whatever, and people create things, and there are certain techniques that they use, very simple colors, sort of clever gimmicks, like the one over here, right? You can, every time you're gonna look up, because you're like, what's the temperature today? Oh, it's 100, I don't know if people can see this very well. It's a Coke billboard. There's 102 reasons to enjoy Coke, where the 102 is a thermostat, it's the temperature, right? And the other one here, you know, you've got this weird billboard that's pointing to an object outside of the billboard. It's clever. It's going to capture your attention. You're going to look at it every time. But the question is, how long could you stare at the billboard and be like enriched or amazed, or like, you can't not look at the billboard, but there's nothing the billboard says to you. It doesn't draw you in past its surface. You know, give you other examples, right? Another clever one over here, the Chipotle one. And it's going to capture your attention because, you know, you want to read both the dark. So if you can't read it, it says obviously in dark letters, our ingredients are better. And then in the light letters, we wanted to write about our locally sourced natural ingredients, but short billboard headlines are better, right? And this is the billboard I would totally read all of, because you're like, wait, what? I see the first message. What's the second message? Like it's sort of hacking into your like curiosity. You can't not look. But again, it's like it's a gimmick, it's clever, it gets your attention for a moment, and then there's nothing. And the way I think of this as, you know, when I think visually what to think about this, I think something like of this. Again, if you can't see super well, ironically, the thing on the left is a baby Einstein toy. So you're gonna make a kid a little Einstein. I think we had some of those in the nursery, maybe we still do, but they're one of those like maximal stimulation toys, right? You can bounce and you can flip this and you can play this music, and like you're never gonna be not stimulated, right? And then the other is a picture, or it's not a great artistic rendition, but someone's imagining of a Victorian childhood. And the thing that strikes me about this is the child with the soldier there, toy soldier, looking at the toy soldier. And you know that kids have that imagination where like they look at something until it becomes as big and like what it actually is. And they like, I mean, I remember I used to, when the snow was melting, I lived in Wisconsin, and we would pretend that we would be on these snowbanks overlooking this like slushy water with these weird like structures underneath it. I only remember they're like frozen mud structures. And we would sit on the hills and we would pretend we were aerial bombing them, okay? A little violent. But like, you do that for 10 minutes as a kid, and like suddenly like you really are standing on mountains looking down at little cities, and like your imagination has just added so much that wasn't there. Right, so it's the image of being, and I think, you know, when you think about this, and I think this is essentially what most of, you know, our phones do for us, right? After you play with that, are you going to remember any of it after? I mean, obviously the kid's too young, but I mean, you imagine the equivalent of it's like stimulus, 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 right? It's like when you look at like video reels for an hour, if that's your thing, and then afterwards you're like, what do I remember of this hour? And the answer will almost certainly be nothing. It's just, each one is like, boom, look at me, boom, look at me, boom, look at me, and then it's gone, right? And you know, you compare that with like if you were to, you know, discipline yourself to do something else, like read a novel or anything that's like drawing your attention in. You build a memory, you are active in participating in it. And I'm trying to think if I mean, I guess what I'd like to suggest, and I'll see if you have thoughts or counterexamples for us, and then maybe say one more point a little later, is that like the problem with our, well, there's a couple more things. The problem with our culture is that first of all, there's plenty of people whose entire job is to get your attention, to capture it, not to captivate it, right? And they study how to do that, okay? The next thing is that when you consume, like what makes this different? I mean, imagine I'm just reading news on this. What makes it different from a paper copy of a magazine? And one thing that makes it different, there's infinite stuff on this, right? And whenever you have an environment with infinite stuff that you can easily always go to the next thing with no loss, with no, like there's no commitment, you will keep going, right? All of us are not gonna stay focused on one, like I read a fair amount of news on my phone. I don't know that I ever read an entire article without skimming some of it, right? And partly it's because it's just like, okay, what's the next thing? Like there's an infinite number of things, I got to get to the next thing, right? And so because there's an infinite amount of stuff, you're always drawn to what attracts your attention, and you're not prone to like wait and let it grip you, right? Whenever anything starts out slowly, I'm like, no, next. Like, it's got to grab me in like the first sentence, okay? And then the final thing, so one is like you have this environment where you can always look for something else, and you always do. You don't dwell and wait, like imagine the kid with the soldier toy, and now you showed that kid an iPad, right? Like the soldier toy is not as exciting as the iPad. It may draw you in more, but it's not as initially as exciting. But then the other idea is like, so not only do we consume content in this way, but we now all create content like this. Like anyone who tries to get their pictures, their opinions, anything viewed online, all of us are constantly trying to say, how can I make what I do maximally captivating, which is to usually say minimally cultivating, okay? And then the final thing that this does and the internet does is you can have exact mathematical information on exactly how attractive or compelling every single thing out there is, right? Think about the old days in the newspapers. You have a bunch of headlines and a bunch of stories, and you don't actually know how many people read that story and were drawn by that headline. And if you've noticed, like again, I mentioned BuzzFeed and Huffington Post, because they were both done, I forget the guy's name. If anyone wants a book, by the way, about that sort of segues into this, there's a book called The Attention Merchants, which is all about sort of the science of grabbing attention and how it changes through different media. But anyway, he spends some time talking about this guy, I forget the guy's name now, but he was sort of the godfather of the viral content, right? And he went on to co-found Huffington Post, and then later went to BuzzFeed. And basically, like, there's a certain kind of headline, and you know it, it's clickbait, basically. But they were mathematically figuring out how to do that. That wasn't just like, oh, this is kind of clever. They're like, let's test this one against this one. Ooh, that one got 17% more clicks and 40% more shares. Go with that one, right? And so it is a advertising has become a science in a way it never was before. It used to just be like, what's your gut tell you? Is this going to appeal to people? Maybe a little test focus group. But now it's like, nope. Every single thing you ever do is feeding information to people to say, we know how to maximally captivate your attention, but not cultivate your attention. So anyway, you had some thoughts that you weren't totally...
Yeah, so no, I agree in general that some things captivate and other things really do cultivate our attention. But I don't think that they're always opposite things. So for some of the, again, I was in Kentucky, it was at Asbury a week or two ago, and driving along the road, and so two things. I saw this incredible yellow bird that I had never seen before. Yellow bird with like a black throat. It was striking. And so I asked the guy, Jonathan, who was driving me, like, what kind of a bird is that? And he hadn't seen it, and he's not into birds, so I had to go and look it up later, right? The next day, we're driving, and there's this huge fat animal on the side of the road, like thinking about crossing. And now I was in the car with two guys, and I was like, what is that? And they had not seen it, and I think it was a groundhog, big fat groundhog, right? Those things absolutely capture. They do capture my attention. A cool bird, an animal in an unexpected place, a really pretty sunset, or like a strand of music that you hear. I think those things can grab as effectively as those terrible little TV screens at gas stations. If you gave me, if I could just make them illegal, I would make them illegal, right? I hate them with all of my heart, right? But like a cool bird will, I think, capture my attention to just the same extent.
Yeah, so a follow-up that strikes me then. How do you think, so God obviously cultivates our attention. How does, in your own life and in Scripture, what role do you think his capturing of our attention, like dramatically, how often does he do it? How does he do it? Why doesn't he do it more often?
Oh, that last one, you're gonna ask me that? I have no idea.
I do.
Why he
I'll tell you the
doesn't do
answer.
it more often. I think he does do it sometimes, though. I do. That's a hard question to answer because I don't think, I think God knows us all really well. I don't have the answer to why some people have more of these experiences than others, but I do think for some of us, there have been times where it was like, no, God just showed up and made himself very obvious in a way that could not, in one of those capturing kind of ways.
Yeah, so bracketing the question of why some and not others, and just say, why doesn't he do it more often for all of us?
You tell me.
Okay, I will. I'm glad you asked. No. I was waiting for no. I mean, whatever. I'm being partly facetious. Only partly. No, I mean, I take it like you could imagine God is like, hey, Abraham, go to Israel. And he gets there and there's Jesus and he performs a bunch of miracles. Right? He's like, no, you can go wander around there, Abraham, for the rest of your life. And then your descendants will go down to Egypt for a while. And I'll do a really big thing then. Kill all the pharaohs. You'll get your attention. And then it'll be a couple hundred years and you're not going to get much. And so,
I know.
Wait,
I mean, he makes this huge promise to Abraham that he's going to have 1 million children, and then he gets no children. And then he's silent until Abraham's like 100, and he's like, excuse me, are you doubting me? I feel such sympathy for Abraham. Of course he's doubting you. He's 100 years old.
I guess I take it the issue is, this is a hypothesis, I suppose, put it that way, that what he wants from us those dramatic moments plant a seed, right? But the dramatic moments can only at most plant a seed, and the cultivation is a slow and drawn out process. You often will see with miracles, and even with Jesus would be the miracles, like you're just here because you saw the food, and what you need to be doing is taking my words and meditating upon them and let them being seeds that are not, that grow deep roots and that are not choked out by cares. Right, so the thought would be like, I think the kind of attention we need is it only comes slowly through, lots of time and lots of waiting and lots of looking. And so those moments that are dramatic, they're good, but they're, like, it wouldn't actually be better if there were more of them.
Yeah, so I want to check the time because.
Yeah,
we do. Okay, I'll just say what. Okay, I'll say this one thing, then we'll go to your question. Yeah, because I think the most beautiful. I teach the Grand Inquisitor in a literature class I teach at USF, and it's a chapter from a book by Dostoevsky, but it's also a standalone short story. And basically, a Grand Inquisitor of the Catholic Church Jesus shows up, and he's clear. He's like, this isn't his second coming. He's just popping in to check things out. And the Grand Inquisitor puts him on trial, and he basically says, look, you overestimated your creation. They were never going to get to God your way, right? And so we just have totally seized control of their free will, and we just lie to them and bully them. But as a result, we actually love them more than you do because our tactics work. We just coerce them into following after you. You wanted them to follow you freely because you thought, well, if I did too many miracles, they'll just follow me for bread and not truly. And the Grand Inquisitor's like, I mean, you were right about that, right? They always just would have been thinking about the bread. But he just tears into Jesus. In the whole story, Jesus is silent. And he keeps saying, I'm going to execute you publicly tomorrow, right? And then at the end of the story, Jesus kisses him, and he sort of gets flustered, and he lets Jesus go. Says he didn't change his mind, right? The kiss burned in his heart, but he didn't change his mind. But he doesn't kill Jesus. So I've been teaching this story for years. And it was not until about a year ago that it clicked that he's pushing Jesus to do the thing he's mad at Jesus for not doing. He's like, if you just did more miracles, people would follow you. I'm going to execute you publicly tomorrow. I've been actively working against you. For the Grand Inquisitor to get what he wants there, Jesus should have publicly destroyed him the next day, right? This huge, great scene. And it would have been this massive miracle, right? And then everybody would have been blown. And instead, he just kisses him. Right? And I feel like what's so powerful about it is it's like, no, this is actually God's love. I heard what you said. I still love you. I'm still not going to bulldoze you with a miracle. I'm just not going to do it. Right? This is who I am. Sit with that. I maybe didn't do a great job explaining the relevance there, but I mean, read that story. It's so powerful. But I do think there is something about the kind of way we have to grow in God that has to be done slowly and has to include some waiting and some just, what philosophers would call epistemic distance from God, some distance between ourselves and what we can know or see about him. I mean, I think so. I think our senses, thinking about the music at the concert or the bird and the groundhog on the side of the road, there were also smells at the concert. But all of these things, again, I think we use these senses in a more beneficial way when they're reasonably trained to discern things, right? So, I don't know, you say.
Yeah, I think one of the more regrettable, maybe, if I can say that, excesses of the Reformation was to take too many things that are physical and see them as a form of superstition.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously, if you think that that God hears me more when I kneel than when I pray in a different way, like that's a superstition. But it's clearly the case that the physical posture that you're in, right? It's just your body being in a posture. It's nothing to do with ideas, but it shapes your memory and your attention profoundly. So yeah, I think we need to get little kneelers installed in the church, maybe. No, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, so to me personally, when I think about that question, like I started always kneeling in a very specific way when I pray on my own at home, which I'd never done until about 5 years ago. It's like, why would I do that? I can pray any way I want. I can walk, I can sit, I can, kneel. And that is really profound in just flipping a switch. You're in a different headspace.
Yeah, fasting too. Whether it's like fasting completely from food or fasting from certain things that you love, it's just a physical discipline. But every time you want the thing that you're fasting from, especially if it's all food, it is a kind of reorienting of attention. It's another reminder. It's like, oh, this is when I would usually go to food, right? I should go to God, or, yeah, sorry, I saw Doug's hand also, yeah.
Yeah, out of curiosity, if I can answer a question with a question, are you inclined to see it in transactional terms?
I think so.
Okay.
I think I'm not.
I'm not either, but I don't. It's just a hard question, I think, in some ways. I guess here's the reason why I don't. I mean, I think it's a little hard to get at the issue, but I think what I'm inclined to say is that we don't love things because of what they give us. We love things because the way we partially lose ourselves in them. And so I think it's not like my love of football is really more my giving myself to football to a certain extent. And it's not like, well, then I get some stuff back. I mean, obviously there's a sense in which you can always describe it that way. I enjoyed watching football today, right? So I got some enjoyment, and so that's fine. But I think it misses the degree to which, there is nothing quite like playing chess or watching football or doing any of these things. And it's not like there's some thing in me that I get from each of them, and maybe you get that same thing in you from some totally different activity.
Yeah, I think it's, now that I'm thinking about it, sometimes transactional. When I was in grad school, much of my attention was transactional, right? I have a huge exam. They're somehow going to ask me questions on these 25 books, right? So I have to give all of my attention to this to get what I need to succeed on this test. But I guess I hope that most of our attention isn't like that. Like when I pay attention to something that I love, especially if it's to someone that I love, I wouldn't want, particularly in relationships, and so particularly in worship and in relation to God, for it to be like, all right, well, I'm going to pay attention to God, and I'm going to get the feeling of, I don't know, experience of God, or just like checking the box that I did that thing. I think when you give attention to something that you love for its own sake, rather than loving it as a stepping stone to this other thing that you want, then it isn't transactional. Then you're paying attention to the thing for the thing itself. Like what you want is just to be kind of with that thing for a bit.
I mean, I would assume the prioritization is necessary because we're finite and the world is infinite, and that's what attention is, right? So you imagine, I mean, I was just at this concert again last night. I would try to shift to foreground different instruments. So for a while, I'm not hearing the bass enough. I'm gonna stare at the bass and I'm gonna try to foreground that. But the point is you just can't hear it all. And then Dolores had this, she played bass for a while. And then told me, when she was playing bass, all she could ever hear in any song was the bass.
There was one summer where I worked crazy hard to learn the drum part
it's drums, not bass, that's right.
Yeah. I play a lot of instruments not very well. But so one summer I was like, this is the summer of drums. And there was one song, I was just gonna nail this drum part. And so I spent hours in the basement with good headphones, listening to this one song. But I do think your brain what I was trying to do was pay attention to the drums. And it got to the point where my brain would sort of lower the volume on the other instruments and raise that to the point that when I hear the song now, I have to correct it back, because my brain's automatic thing is like, oh, for this one, she wants me to tune out everything but the drums. We're done. Okay. Okay, last thing. I think the ordering shows up at the level of love, though, not just attention. I think that we all love some things more than others. And so you're going to pay more attention to the things you love more. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you. This was really fun.